Hello and welcome to the Fat Doctor podcast. I am your host, Dr. Ashalami, and it is Wednesday, the 29th of April. I know this because I am recording today's episode 16 of season 6 of the Doctor podcast. I'm recording it the day before. It's Tuesday the 28th right now. It's very last minute for me. I'm not usually this underprepared, but it's because I've been very busy writing a book and then editing a book, then proofreading a book, then fixing all the mistakes in the book, then formatting the book, then uploading the book and getting it ready for publishing. But it's ready, it's uploaded, it's done. It is available to pre-order. The Kindle, the ebook is available to pre-order. The book will be released on the 20th of May. There'll be more details to follow at the end of this podcast. So yeah, I've been a bit busy. I'm super excited. And everything that I've been talking about in season 6 of the Fat Doctor podcast is in the book. I appreciate that not everybody reads books. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't read books very often, non-fiction books. So that's fair enough. And so I want you to be able to have all of this information, which is why I'm sharing a lot of it in the podcast. Today is no different. Today I'm going to be talking about something called, I hate even to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, diabesity. You ever heard of that one? I don't know if I've mentioned it before. Diab city. That is what happens when the medical profession, and I really mean it, the medical profession has done this, ships diabetes and obesity. Marry them off, put them together, turn them into a couple, write fan fiction about them. That's what they've done. And this one's personal for me, as many of you know. I am a diabetic. In fact, you who have been with me, if you've been with me from the beginning, I remember episode 3 of season 1 of the Fat Doctor podcast. I was talking to Dr. Gregory Dodell and I was telling him how terrified I was of developing diabetes. I was like, I'm terrified of the diagnosis. I'm so afraid to go and get my blood checks. I'm just so sure they're going to tell me I'm diabetic. That was 2020. That's 2026. I can't remember when I was diagnosed. 21 maybe? Yeah, because it was post COVID. I'd had COVID a couple of times and then I got diagnosed. So it wasn't that much later than I got diagnosed myself. So this is personal. I am not the only fat diabetic out there, but there is a lot of shame that we carry, isn't there, with this diagnosis? And I'm going to talk to you about why that is today. All right, this is what this episode is all about. Why do we associate diabetes and obesity, and why do we feel so much shame? Now, I'm going to be using the O word, obesity, quite a few times in this podcast. I use it quite often now. It's a really horrible word. It makes my skin crawl. It puts the hairs on the back of my neck up every single time I say it. It's gross. Ugh. Ugh. But I say it anyway. I say it because that's what they say, and I refuse to be afraid of a word. That's what they say, so that's what I'm going to say. But let it be known that there is really no such thing as obesity. So it actually just literally means fat. And the first chapter of my book is basically just kind of, just proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's just a made-up term. It's not a real disease, as they'd like us to believe. The reason that we think it's a disease is because of the pharmaceutical industry. And that's what I'm going to be focusing my attention on here today and for the next couple of episodes, actually. It's all about how the pharmaceutical industry has done this, has created this. Now, society has hated fat people for a very long time. It predates the pharmaceutical industry. However, turning fat into a disease, that's on the pharmaceutical industry. They were the main players. They were the ones driving this the whole time. They paid the WHO in 1998 for a report that basically says, this is what obesity is. This is a disease, and this is how we define it using BMI. And by the way, it's an epidemic, and we're going to call it an epidemic. And that's what the report's going to read. The title of the report's going to call it an epidemic. The pharmaceutical industry paid for that. Specifically, drug companies who at the time were about to release their weight loss drugs. The National Institute of Health in the US followed suit a year later, and bing bang bong, bish bash bosh. Don't know what bing bang bong was. I made that up, but it sounded good in the moment. Comes together, and here we are. 25 years, a quarter of a century later. Here's where we're at. That's where we're at. So let's talk about the pharmaceutical industry and how they did this and what this has to do with diabetes. See, they have a strategy. It's a very obvious strategy. You don't have to be a genius to understand the strategy. First of all, they create the market. right? Then they fund the guidelines. They pay for the research, I should say. They pay for the research. The research into all of their drugs is funded completely by the drug companies themselves. It's not independent researchers. No, no, no. It's funded by the drug companies. Then they fund the guidelines. Pretty much all of the guidelines processes, all of the kind of approvals, the FDA, the NICE, etc., etc. It's all paid for by drug companies. Then they train doctors and they lobby politicians and they market directly to you, the consumer. They create this incredible PR campaign that is relentless. It's also they can make money. That's their strategy. And at the beginning of the century, drug companies got together and decided that they needed to improve their PR essentially. And they chose type 2 diabetes as like the ideal vehicle for selling weight loss. It was like the cracker, that you place the cheese on. Cheese being the weight loss product. The cracker, the vehicle, was diabetes. And there were many reasons for this. Number one, it's a very common condition. It's very easy to screen for. Just takes a blood test, right? It's kind of like blood pressure, just very simple. In fact, blood pressure is probably simpler. It's asymptomatic. You don't know you have it. It's a frightening condition, right? It's scary. Nobody wants to get it, but it's also manageable. Most people know somebody who has diabetes, and like, oh, it's scary. Oh, you might lose a limb, or you might drop dead of a heart attack or a stroke. But also it's manageable. It's not too scary that you're going to shut down, but it's scary enough that you're going to take notice. It's one of those conditions. Probably scarier than high blood pressure for some people, for most people. But yeah, they knew that they needed something that was going to really just scare people. And so they chose this condition and they said, we're going to basically make the two synonymous with each other. Because diabetes just used to be a medical condition, right? It was just a condition, just like any other medical condition. But now it's like it's a fat person's condition. Fat people get diabetes. Diabetics are all fat, and anyone who doesn't fit into that little box of fat and diabetic is sort of other outlier. Thin and diabetic, very different. Type 1 diabetic, very different. I mean, to be fair, that is true. We're talking about type 2 diabetes here, of course. Type 1, very different condition. But there are kind of, we separate them. But the majority of people are fat and diabetic. They have diabesity. Just give them a label, a name. So there's a lot of shame around this diagnosis. So we carry this shame, us fat diabetics. We carry this shame. It's sort of something that we've been conditioned to experience, and that makes us very vulnerable to marketing, right? Even if you are anti-weight loss, if you get a diabetes diagnosis, certainly in my experience, things change very quickly. So how did it all happen? Let me paint you a picture. I've told this story before, so I'm not going to spend too long talking about it, but I just want to paint you a picture for those who have forgotten or who haven't heard it the first time round. Back in 2001, the American Diabetes Association PR department decided that there was a term, impaired fasting glucose, impaired glucose tolerance. Neither of those really excited anyone. Neither of them really made sense to lay people. And doctors were a bit like, no, yeah, what are you going to do? And they wanted to get people to take this condition more seriously. So they coined the term prediabetes. It was a public relations exercise. It was not a scientific one, right? It was just branding. And it's like I said, diabetes is a perfect condition for that. You can't have pre-arthritis, you can't have pre-sleep apnea, you can't have pre-asthma. It's just, that's weird. You don't have that. So you either have it or you don't have it. But diabetes is one of these things. It's kind of like blood pressure, where your blood sugar kind of is allowed to go up to a certain point, and once it tips over, then it's diabetes. Before, it's not diabetes. So they decided that the little bit before, so you've got quote unquote normal, and then a little bit high, and then high enough to be diabetes. They were like, that bit in between, that little buffer zone, let's turn that into a medical condition. Let's call it prediabetes. So that's what they did. And now the problem with this is that the pre part of the prediabetes diagnosis implies that eventually you're going to become diabetic. except you're not. And we know we have many, many studies. The best study out there is from 2018. Best study. It's the most in-depth studies from 2018. It was a Cochrane study, a Cochrane review, and it found that most people who have, who are diagnosed with prediabetes never actually progress to diabetes. Most people. In fact, people who had, what they call impaired fasting glucose because they don't use the prediabetes because it's not a real thing. But people who have this sort of, slightly raised level of sugar in their blood can return to normal levels up to 11 years later, probably longer. It's just that's, the longest recorded in the evidence. 11 years later. So it just, it's not a guarantee. It's not even like, pretty sure thing. It's not a safe bet. It's actually most people won't develop diabetes. So this idea that if you have prediabetes, that's it. If you don't do something, you're going to get diabetes is a lie, and it was always a lie. And we kind of always knew to a degree that it was a lie because the experts were saying from the beginning, this isn't a real thing. You've made that up. That's PR. That's not science. But the American Diabetes Association was very, very, very strongly pro prediabetes, and the CDC went, okay, all right then, we'll listen to you. We'll do what you say. We'll take on board all of your suggestions because that's what happens, isn't it? Organizations like the CDC, like NICE, they listen to the charities, to the patient organizations like the American Diabetes Association. So we have this situation where there is a made-up condition and people are being diagnosed with it and they're being told to what? Lose weight, right? Lose weight. Why? Why are they being told to lose weight? Why have we put two and two together? Well, that's all because of a study that came out just before. In fact, it came out in 2001 maybe or 2002. I can't remember. It was literally around the same time. And this was the Diabetes Prevention Program. It was a 3-year randomized controlled trial, over 3,000 participants recruited between 1996 and 1999. So it was a big study. And these were people who had impaired fasting glucose, or what would soon become known as prediabetes. And they were separated into 3 separate groups. One group had an intensive lifestyle intervention. In other words, they went on a diet and they lost weight. One group was taking metformin, a medication that has been known to improve insulin resistance. And one group was the control group. And initially, in that first 3-year period, they found that people in the lifestyle group had a lower incidence of developing diabetes. And so did the people in the metformin group, but the lifestyle group won, and the control group had the most amounts and the highest incidence of developing diabetes. And they were like, there you go, proof, weight loss works. So they got to tie it all up in a nice little bow and present it to everybody and go, see, here's proof, here's a nice big study, and we know what we're talking about. Turns out they don't, because when you look at the long-term data, there is no difference between the weight loss group and the metformin group and the control group, right? If anything, weight loss and metformin possibly delayed those who were going to develop diabetes. Remember, most people don't, but those who were going to develop diabetes, it delayed that diagnosis by a couple of years, 3 years, something like that. So that's all it did, but it certainly didn't prevent it. And as I explained, I think in even the last podcast or a couple of podcasts ago, diabetes in of itself is not actually a condition that you need to be concerned about. It generally isn't symptomatic if you've got a relatively low blood sugar. Once it gets really high, you can develop symptoms, but most of the time it's asymptomatic. And the problem is that it can lead to problems down the line, like heart disease and limb amputations and all of that stuff, eye problems, kidney problems. And so the biggest question we need to be asking ourselves is not whether or not people develop diabetes, it's whether or not people who with a pre-diabetes diagnosis, whether or not losing weight prevented them from having a heart attack or a stroke or anything that actually matters. And the answer is no. Didn't prevent anything. Didn't do anything. Lifestyle interventions made absolutely no difference whatsoever in the long term. Just in a short enough time period that they could wrap it up in a bow, present it to the world and go, here you go, here's proof. But you see, the problem is all of that long-term data came much later. The studies came, at the end of the, 2015 onwards, 2020, some of them. This was all happening in 2001. The PR campaign was happening in 2001. In 2009, an international expert committee rejected the term prediabetes. The CDC, instead of going, all right, most of the world thinks we're wrong. Maybe we were wrong. Instead of doing that, CDC literally doubled down and said not only is prediabetes a thing, but we're going to widen the diagnostic criteria, make the blood sugar levels even lower so we can diagnose more people with prediabetes. Because they assured us that in doing so, they were going to reduce the number of heart attacks and strokes, etc., etc. Did they? No. They didn't. Of course they didn't. That made no difference whatsoever. The only difference it's made is it created this incredible marketing opportunity for drug companies, certainly, but actually for a lot of people, for people who are selling weight loss. Now they're not just selling weight loss, they're telling you that they can help you prevent diabetes. What a wonderful marketing opportunity, right? The CDC's budget for diabetes prevention went from 66 million in 2010 to 173 million in 2017. And then I don't know what happened since then. I'm going from an article written in 2019. At the same time that this was happening, the cancer prevention budget plummeted. They took money from cancer prevention, which, by the way, is very evidence-based and very important, and they stuck it into diabetes prevention, even though it has absolutely no impact on the number of heart attacks, strokes, cancer, eye disease, kidney disease, you name it. It's completely ineffective. But drug companies are loving it. Where do you think that 173 million dollars is going? It's going to the weight loss industry, or a lot of it is. And it gets worse than that because you see, the problem is millions of people around the US are diagnosed with a hypothetical, asymptomatic condition. It increases their health anxiety. Why am I saying their? I'm saying yours. It increases your health anxiety, right? Whether or not you have it, or it's just the fear of it, the anxiety of it is enough. It increases health anxiety. It increases insurance premiums the moment you get that label. It increases the number of weight loss prescriptions. So who's benefiting? The weight loss industry, the insurance industry, and who's suffering? You. That's the way it works. That's the strategy. Diabesity is more about branding than it is about facts. And then the thing you have to understand then is that the American Diabetes Association, the ones who were pushing for pre-diabetes to be, this thing, it was all about PR and branding, they are sponsored by the pharmaceutical industry. Their founding pathway sponsors are Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, and Sanofi. Poor Sanofi never got a weight loss drug in there. Sanofi's lost. They're not doing well. Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly have the second and third biggest selling drugs on the market in 2025. The second and third. Eli Lilly went from being an outsider to being the highest grossing drug company in the world in 2025 because of Mounjaro. Solely because of Mounjaro. These are the same companies funding the American Diabetes Association, paying for all of this diabetes branding and marketing and PR. Same people, same companies, I should say. In 2020, Novo Nordisk was essentially a diabetes company. I don't know if you know this about Novo Nordisk, but it started off as an insulin laboratory, and most of their business has been diabetes for 100 years. 8 out of every $10 that they earned before 2020 was for diabetes, mainly from insulin. Then in 2021, they released their drug, Wegovy, semaglutide for weight loss. Ozempic actually is not supposed to be prescribed for weight loss. Prior to 2021, Ozempic was being prescribed for diabetes. It was earning Novo Nordisk a fair amount of money because it was a novel diabetes drug and everyone was prescribing it and everyone loved it because it caused weight loss. But that's an aside. That was for diabetes. 2021, Wegovy, not Ozempic, Wegovy was licensed by the FDA and then shortly after by most countries for the treatment of quote unquote obesity, just for the treatment of fatness. And then Ozempic sales skyrocketed, Wegovy sales skyrocketed. And by 2025, semaglutide, Wegovy and Ozempic, accounted for 2/3 of Novo Nordisk's entire global revenue. 8 out of every $10 was for diabetes treatment. That's 80% of their income. And now two-thirds of their income is from weight loss. Roughly. You have to separate the diabetes part, and I can't do that. But you know what I'm saying, right? It's very obvious what's going on here. And that is because the market for treating sick people is limited, but the market for treating healthy people is unlimited. Sky's the limit. If you can convince healthy people that they are sick and that they need to take a treatment to make them lose weight so that they will prevent an illness, sky's the limit. According to the CDC, over 115 million Americans, that's 1 in 3 Americans, have prediabetes. Talk about opening up a market, creating a marketplace. I mean, it's kind of genius, if you ask me. And they're not stupid. They knew what they were doing. Isn't that amazing? So just to remind you, in 2001, they created a disease, solely a PR campaign, absolutely no evidence, in spite of all the warnings from all of the international experts around the world from 2001 until today. Everyone's saying there's no such thing as prediabetes. Stop spending money on prediabetes. There's no point in treating prediabetes. If we treat prediabetes, nothing happens. We don't benefit people in any way, shape, or form. The only people who are benefiting from this are drug companies and the weight loss industry. Stop treating it. Stop taking money away from cancer prevention. Cancer prevention is essential. Stop wasting money on drug companies, in spite of all of the experts saying this repeatedly over and over again. We're living in a world where diabetes is so very much, we're conditioned, it's ingrained in our society. We are conditioned to believe that the two go hand in hand, that if you're fat you're going to be diabetic, and so you need to lose weight to prevent diabetes. And that's just one of the many conditions that are associated with being fat, of course. I mean, there are so many, but I picked diabetes, A, because it's personal, but B, because it's the biggest one. And if you look, even with the NHS, the doctor who is responsible, there are doctors who are clinical directors and for the NHS, and they're responsible for particular a particular area of medicine. Like there'll be like a director for neurological problems, and one for respiratory problems, and one for the obvious. The one who's responsible for diabetes is also responsible for obesity. They go hand in hand. It's like a joint job, I'm responsible for diabetes and obesity because the two things are so closely related now that the NHS cannot even be bothered to have a separate director for both of them. They just join them together. Like I said, they've married them off, they've shipped them. And it impacts you and me. Because like I said, it's the shame. It's the way that people can say, you're gonna get it. And if you go, oh, actually, technically that's not true, they're like, you're just, making excuses, and you're just cherry picking data, and they refuse to believe you because it's a narrative. It's a narrative that's been driven by 25 years of PR. And so you can't convince people that they're wrong. They know that they're right. And even if you shove a ton of evidence in their faces and go, that's not true, the damage has been done. They were very clever about it. And so if you don't have diabetes, your doctor's like, what? But look at you. They stare at you, they look at you, they look at the size of you, they sort of wave their hand at you like, this? How can it be? Your blood sugar is normal. They're horrified. They keep checking it. They check it over and over again. We just need to check it again, just in case the first test was wrong. Because it's not possible that you can be fat and have a normal blood sugar. That's just not possible. So same with the blood pressure. You can't have a normal blood pressure. You're fat. But also, if you're like me and you're fat and diabetic, then, sit back in their chair, cross their arms, very smugly tell you, well, that was bound to happen, wasn't it? And what are you supposed to say to that? How are you supposed to feel? It's my fault. I did it. I did it to myself. It's all my fault. I blame myself. It's because I, ate the wrong things, didn't exercise enough, didn't take care of myself. It's because I'm fat. I'm so ashamed. I can't admit it to people. You carry that stigma with you everywhere you go. And it affects the way you eat. It affects the way you move. It affects the way you live your life. It's not the condition, because this is the thing. Diabetes is relatively easy to treat. We have lots of drugs out there. There's a protocol. Almost every healthcare professional knows how to manage it. It's not an obscure disease. It's not a disease with no treatment. Of all the diseases you're going to get, it's fairly middle of the road, right? Like it's neither here nor there. Just take a pill. You don't even, it's asymptomatic. There are way worse conditions out there. But the shame, for me, the shame of it. I don't know what's more shameful, having a mental health diagnosis or having an a diabetes diagnosis and an obesity diagnosis, because that's also going in your medical records. I'm not sure which is worse. I think they're all stigmatizing. Um, but why don't we treat people with why don't we treat diabetes like we treat asthma? It's a medical condition. We'll just treat it like a medical condition. Although I've heard that people get blamed for being fat and having asthma now as well. So, joint pain, it's because you're fat. Sleep apnea, it's because you're fat. Liver, fat. Blood pressure, fat. Heart disease, fat. Yeah, there's a lot of conditions actually. Maybe I'm biased because I have diabetes. But anyway, um, that's my little spiel on diabetes. Diabetes. Um, in 2023, I just want to leave you with this. And this is really important, actually. In 2023, the American Diabetes Association updated their guidelines on the treatment of type 2 diabetes. Very common for them to update their guidelines. In 2023, weight loss and blood sugar control are now officially of equal importance. They are just as concerned about your blood sugar as they are about your weight. Or I should say, they are just as concerned about your weight as they are about your blood sugar. And that was not the case before, right? Like weight loss was always in part of the guidelines. There was always mention of weight loss, but now it's at the very top, right at the very top. The two mainstays of treatment: manage the blood glucose, manage the weight. That was in 2023, the American Diabetes Association. In 2023, the American Diabetes Association received just over $10 million from Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. That represents 40% of all the pharmaceutical donations that they received. Of all the pharmaceutical donations, 40% came from two drug companies. That's a lot, right? $10 million is a lot for 1 year. This is a charity. I mean, you can go and look at what the American Diabetes Association does. You can go find out this healthcare organization. What do they do? A lot of it is lobbying and, persuading doctors and persuading healthcare professionals to promote drugs. And they're sponsored by drug companies. And so there's a definite conflict of interest there. But specifically now, in 2023, $10 million spent by just two drug companies who happen to be the only two drug companies out there who are manufacturing weight loss injections right now. How very convenient. And all of a sudden, weight loss goes to the top of the list. Right there, black and white, right at the top, page 1, lose weight. They stop short of recommending GLP-1s to lose weight, but it doesn't matter because doctors put 2 and 2 together. So now, if you're one of the 1 in 3 Americans, one of the 150 million Americans, 1 in 3 of them, who happens to have a pre-diabetes diagnosis, what's going to happen? The American Diabetes Association says weight loss is very important. And whilst they stop short of saying you should prescribe Wegovy or Mounjaro, your doctor is going to prescribe Wegovy and Mounjaro, all thanks to a made-up condition that was a PR stunt funded by the pharmaceutical industry. That's what's going on. Just so you know, it's up to you what you choose to do about it. Really very much up to you. But you need to know what's going on. And it's just one of the many things that I'm going to be exposing in my book. No way. Everything you've been told about weight loss is a lie. It is available to pre-order on Amazon right now. Publication date is the 20th of May, which is just 3 weeks away. Well, yes. Yes. Is it 3 weeks away? Yes, I believe it is. If anything you've heard today resonated with you, then this book is for you. And everything we've covered in this season, as I said, is laid out in full with all the evidence in one place. I can't tell you how many hundreds of, but there's more than 200 clinical references in this book So it's all backed up. Not that I'm expecting you to look at the references. I'm just telling you that I'm not making this up. There is evidence. And if you want to know the evidence, and if you're like, Asha, show your sources, it's right there, back of the book, last 35 pages or so. The link to my book is in the show notes. Pre-order it now and it will land on your device on the 20th of May. Yes, I'd love you to order the ebook. You can also order the print book, of course, if you're a print book fan, but I'm very happy for you to order the ebook. If you know someone who needs to hear this, then please, whether it's a friend or a family member, a healthcare professional, anyone you think that might listen, please share this episode with them. Especially if you've got someone who has been diagnosed with diabetes or pre-diabetes or is worried about diabetes or is wondering why everyone won't stop talking about diabetes, then please share this episode with them. Tell them about the book. Tell them it's all going to be in there from start to finish. No Way. That's the name of the book. No Weight. Weigh. No Way. Everything you've been told about weight loss is a lie. Thank you very much for listening. Next week, I am going to be doing a podcast episode on GLP-1s. I know that there are many, many podcast episodes out there on GLP-1s. I'm putting my own spin on it, and I encourage you to join me, and we'll talk then. In the meantime, have a great week, and take care of yourselves.